Washington, lawmakers are divided over the Israeli Prime Minister's speech before Congress. Some are calling it historic. Others say it was political, even condescending. The minority leader, the Democratic leader in the House, Nancy Pelosi, said that. Republican Senator James Risch of Idaho is a member of the Committee on Foreign Relations, also the Select Committee on Intelligence. He's joining us from Capitol Hill right now. I take it you loved the Prime Minister's speech. Is that right, Senator?
Well, it was a great speech. Wolf, I've been doing this for almost 50 years. I've heard hundreds of speeches. That certainly would be at the top, not because it was eloquent, but because it hit the mark so clearly. The speech was very clear. It was full of clarity. He left no doubt about, number one, the state of play, the facts, the history, and where this thing's going to go. So having said all that, it wasn't a speech to entertain. It wasn't really a speech to call to arms. It was a speech to tell people, look, we've got to do this differently than where the administration is headed. And I think he was successful in that regard. And indeed, if you were in the room was electric. I can't recall seeing anyone get a reception like he got on the floor of the House of Representatives yesterday.
We know the Republicans loved it, but many of your Democratic colleagues, about 50 or 60 of them, even refused to attend because they thought it was inappropriate to do so at a time when the U.S. was engaged in these very, very sensitive negotiations with the Iranians and only 2 weeks before the Israeli election. But what's the alternative? Let's say these negotiations in Geneva fail. Would you be ready to support U.S. military action to destroy Iran's nuclear capabilities?
Well, I don't think we need to go there yet. I think that needs to be an option that is always on the table and clearly understood by the Iranians. But the sanctions are painful over there. They brought them to the table only, in my judgment, so that they could stall and get more time. To your point about the people who boycotted that speech, it was really unfortunate. This is an American issue. This isn't a Republican or Democrat issue. Everyone understands, of course, that the president views this as part of his legacy. But look, we need to all be together on this. The White House is threatening a veto of the bill that we're going to try to move that includes Congress, as it should. The Constitution includes Congress for the ratification of any agreement between one or more countries. And we ought to all be pulling the wagon together on this. And if this is a deal that's a good deal, we need to get behind it, or an acceptable deal, we need to get behind it. But if it's not, we need to go back to the sanctions. And that's another bill that's coming down the pike.
Do you want the Senate to pass this new legislation that would require Senate approval for any deal worked out with Iran, even before the deal with Iran is worked out, if in fact there will be a deal?
Well, 2 points. Number one, the Constitution already requires any treaty to be approved.
Well, the administration says this is not a treaty.
They can say whatever they want. You can look at a cat and call it a pig. But look, this is an agreement between nations. It is a treaty. But point number two, the Iranians, when they sat down, said, look, we want you to know that we're here to negotiate. We're going to work towards a treaty, but or an agreement. If we get there, though, it's got to go to our equivalent of a parliament, and they've got to approve it. You mean to tell me that in Iran, they've got a more representative government than America? It's a bizarre situation where you have a president of the United States protecting the Iranian administration when the elected representatives, the American people, want to say just what the Constitution requires, that we approve or disapprove of the deal. It doesn't make sense.
You think you'll get 60 votes in the Senate to do that?
You know, I wouldn't be surprised if we do get 60 votes. This is a bipartisan piece of legislation that was crafted last week. We have, I think there's a half a dozen Democrats on the Foreign Relations Committee that are already signed onto it. The Democrats know as well as Republicans that if we're going to do this, we need to all pull the wagon together. This is a dangerous regime that we're dealing with. It's a dangerous situation. We need to all be pulling in the same direction on this.
Senator Risch, thanks very much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me.
The future